Who is Linux not for? Let's talk about it, because I have some opinions on this, many of which have kind of been fleshed out over the past several weeks. This wasn't even something I talked about, or not talked. I didn't even think about this before. This is something that was only brought to my attention after I made a couple of videos that were a little bit critical of Windows, and then the Linux culties decided to jump on and turn it into a discussion about everyone needs to switch to Linux. And after I've done a bit of research on it, I admit there's a valid case for Linux. There's a valid case for some people for Linux, but there's also a very, very valid case for a lot of people not to go Linux. And if you're denying that, then you really don't have users' best interests at heart. You really don't. If you're going to sit there and you're going to say, oh, Linux is for everyone, it doesn't matter how hard it is to switch over. It doesn't matter how much you have to relearn, how many pieces of software you have to dump and switch to something else. If you don't care about that stuff at all, if all that is in your head is Linux good, Windows bad, end of story, like, I don't even want to have a discussion with you. Like, I admit Windows is not good in some ways. It has its weaknesses, it has its detractions, but Linux is also very much not good in some ways. And there is, man, look, if I were looking to get married, I wish I could find me a woman who loved me as much as Linux, as much as the hardcore Linux users love their Linux, man. I would never feel like a lonely man. I'll say that's for sure. I mean, I guess you folks I guess you figured out what you're in love with. So, I mean, you got that. So who I think Linux is not for, I think it really comes down more to how many things you're going to have to try to change. I think that there is a point at which, like in my case, I would have to get different video editing software, different audio editing software, different photo editing software. Some of my games may or may not work. Some will work, some will be difficult, but they'll work, and some just won't work at all. The biggest concern that I have that I'm pretty sure cannot be completely overcome is my 4K 60 Pro capture card. I have not even begun to look into whether or not a different manufacturer's capture card might be natively compatible with Linux. I don't know. Obviously, I'm using the Elgato stuff. But then you cross into the territory of you're arranging your lifestyle for the operating system, and I'm not about that. I'm not about changing my entire lifestyle, because obviously you see this channel, I use a lot of tech, and I'm not willing to completely alter that lifestyle in order to satiate some people who say, oh, you should use this, you should use that. No, I'm using what works. So for gamers, I think Linux could be a good option, especially if all you're doing is gaming. But you're going to want to look into whether or not the specific games that you play are going to work. If you've got the know-how and you can figure out how to install Linux, my guess is you've got the know-how and are going to fairly easily be able to reverse it. Or just as likely, you're going to have a second computer. I would argue that just about anyone who is going to know how to install and configure anything in Linux probably has more than one computer at their disposal. So I would probably recommend installing it, figuring out if your game works, testing your game, seeing if your game works. If it works, then, by all means, switch. If you're happy with it otherwise, it's really more about what you're happy with. I think for audio and video editors, I think by and large, it's going to be a no-go. I know people out there running around saying, oh, well, you don't need Adobe. Nobody uses Adobe. And that's just not true. I know too many people who use Adobe for me to ever buy into that line of crap, because it's a line of crap. Too many people use it for me to buy into that. Definitely Lightroom. photography types, everyone's using Lightroom. Okay, not everyone. Someone's going to come on here and be, "Yeah, I don't use Lightroom." You're lying because I don't use Lightroom, and I know a bunch of other people that don't use Lightroom. Well, I personally, I don't. I don't know a lot of people who don't use Lightroom, so that are into photography. Right, into photography. Yeah, I mean, obviously, my mom isn't into photography and she doesn't use Lightroom, so right. Who else? Yeah, I think those are the main ones. It's just you need to look into how much stuff you're going to have to change. I tend to believe that the cutoff is probably 3 things. I just past needing to relearn 3 different things beyond the OS itself, I think is just asinine. I'm sorry. Unless I really had a real, like, look, if you've decided that you hate Windows and you absolutely have to get off Windows, you hate it, you hate Microsoft, you hate the software industrial complex, you hate that people are making money on software, I get it, you're out there, you do exist. In that case, you're not going to care. You're going to switch to Linux no matter what. It won't matter what you have to give up. It won't matter what you have to switch your hardware to. You're going to give up Windows and you're going to switch to Linux. So if that's you, I mean, just get it over with already and do it. Otherwise, yeah, my original opinion stands. I think once you get past having to change 2, 3, 4 things, I think at that point you should do it as only a last resort. I'm not saying that Microsoft might not push us to that point, but we aren't at that point today. We may be at that point tomorrow, but that day is not this day. So anyway, I hope you guys found this interesting. And if you are a Linux culty, let's have it. Let's hear the comments. I won't even respond harshly, I promise. I feel like that scene on The Dictator where he says he won't use nuclear weapons to wipe out his neighbors. He's like, "We promise we will not use our nuclear weapons. We will only use them for peaceful purposes." I feel like that guy. That's how I feel about right now telling Linux users I won't give them any negative comments on this video. But in any case, thanks for watching the video.